When it comes to rogues galleries, you'd be hard-pressed to find one with more memorable and complex villains than Batman's. From jacked masterminds, to a tortured soul weaponizing fear, to a man really into condiments, he's got it all. And since Batman is such a popular character, we've been blessed with seeing so many of his villains brought into live action, for better or for worse. But let's not focus on the past. Today we're here to talk about the future. I could not be more excited for The Batman Part 2, as its predecessor is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's an absolute masterpiece and a movie I will forever treasure, and a large part of that is because of how interesting the villains are. Look what they did with the Riddler. I'll always love the sillier take of the character, but in this grounded universe, I really like how they turned him into a more sadistic serial killer type character. They kept the core of the character alive, all while doing a unique take on the villain, even if he does bear a striking resemblance to the Zodiac Killer, now just with a twist stream. But if they were able to reinvent the Riddler for the modern age, I'm really excited about the potential for how these other villains in the universe could be redefined in their own special way. So let's not wait any longer and get to what you've all been waiting for as we dive through this rogues gallery to find the most suitable choice for the long-awaited sequel. Fasten your bat-themed seatbelts and grab your bat popcorn as it's time for America's favorite reality show, The Bat-chelor, as I look to answer the question of who could and should be the villain of Pattinson's next Batman film. But here's the thing. You're probably thinking to yourself that this is obvious, as they already set up Joker to be the villain of the Batman's second Batman, and that's a fair point. But director Matt Reeves confirmed that tease was more about world building and establishing that he already has a past with the Joker than it was about setting him up for the sequel, which leaves a very big opening for someone new. Would I love to see Barry Keoghan's Joker return? Absolutely. He's an incredibly talented actor, and I think he has the potential to put in an all-time performance as the Clown Prince of Crime. But we've seen so many different versions of the Joker in live action up to this point that I think it's time we let other characters have the spotlight. Plus, personally, I need some more time to forget the unhinged things Barry did in Saltburn before I could process him as the Joker, so let's meet our real candidates. Let's kick things off with the most likely candidate, another character who already exists in this universe, that being the Penguin. The Batman largely acted as the beginning of his origin story, as we saw Oz working under Falcone's crime syndicate, along with teaching a very important Spanish lesson.
No habla español, fellas!
Now with Falcone out of the picture, Penguin is able to step up as a real powerhouse in the criminal underworld. It just makes sense that he'd be a contender when they've already done all the hard work in setting him up as a consistent threat in this universe. I mean, just look at this shot right here at the end of the movie. That's some of those blatant foreshadowing for the future, and I mean that in the most complimentary way, because it goes so hard. It's clear that Reeves has a vision for how the Penguin is going to play a role in Batman's story, and perhaps that means setting the two up for a rematch. Especially when you take into account the Penguin series dropping on the streaming service with the dumbest name ever, Max, later this year. That series is only going to further establish him and show his rise to power in Gotham City. It could serve as a great way to not only add depth to his character, but put in the work to position Oz as a genuine threat to Batman, because let's be real, if it came down to a fistfight, Batman would hit that man so hard he'd start to look like Colin Farrell again. This show needs to lift him up with an empire that rivals that of the Romans, and give him the resources he needs to keep the Bat busy. Penguin has never been one of my favorite Batman villains, but I've always appreciated the corner of the universe that he comes from. Farrell's take on the character is also easily my favorite adapted version, even if I do love the horny nightmarish goblin that Danny DeVito's Penguin was. I really hope that this series does a good job defining his character, because there's a lot to work with in the dark underbelly of Gotham City, and he's the perfect character to explore that with. He's a much more straightforward villain than other gimmicky characters, but with how grounded this universe is, he'd obviously fit the tone and is different enough from the Riddler to present a more unique story for Batman. If they also want to continue the themes of Bruce paying for the sins of his family's past, they can lean into how the Waynes practically ousted the Cobblepots from the wealthy elite, and that caused Oz to grow up in poverty. It gives him this grudge against Bruce as he finally has the power to get his revenge. That being said, I don't think he's going to be our winner here tonight. As much as I love that freak, I'd rather see him act as a secondary villain in the background than be the main villain right now. Personally, when it comes to the sequel, I want to see the universe expand even further with newer characters, and continue to build on the mythos for this version of Batman. Farrell's Penguin is great, and I hope he has a role in this upcoming movie, but I want someone new to take the spotlight. A character who pushes not just Batman, but Bruce Wayne out of his comfort zone and to his limit. That brings us to our second candidate, and someone who's a very realistic choice based on what the first movie heavily teased. I'm of course talking about Tommy Elliott, better known as Hush, a childhood friend of Bruce Wayne who grew up rich like he did, but that's basically where their similarities ended. While Bruce grew up with loving parents, Tommy's were abusive and neglective, and understandably he hated them, which, you know what, I can't blame him for that. It all came to a head when he attempted to kill them to be free of their torment and inherit their fortune, but Thomas Wayne managed to save his mother with his skills as a surgeon. Thus began his lifelong grudge against the Wayne family, which he targeted directly at Bruce out of jealousy. His plans didn't come to fruition until a few years later after his mother died, when he finally got the wealth he desired, and he put that towards his master plan to destroy Bruce Wayne. He got plastic surgery to steal his identity and ultimately try and ruin his life. Hush is a fascinating villain because of how personal his ties are to Bruce. Most of Batman's enemies have an issue with the Bat himself, but Hush is one of the few who has beef with the man behind the mask specifically. I think that element there is what would make him a near perfect choice for this movie and what they should focus on. In The Batman, Bruce has no interest in being himself. He's putting all of his time and energy into being Gotham's Dark Knight and doesn't see how Bruce Wayne can help the city. In the sequel, they should develop Bruce's playboy persona more and have his arc throughout the film involve him realizing the value and power that comes with being a Wayne. And the best way to do that? Have Tommy arrive in Gotham posing as him and immediately start ruining things. The public has no perception of who Bruce is since he's a recluse nowadays, so they have no choice but to believe that's who he is now. It would actually force Bruce to start making his presence known to the public as a helpful figure to undo the harm Tommy caused, as he can help develop that man-whore persona we all know and love to help differentiate himself from the Batman identity. The seeds have already been planted for this, as the 2022 film confirmed that the Elliots not only exist in this universe, but already have an established history with the Waynes. Edward Elliot was the reporter who dug up dirt on Thomas during his mayoral election campaign. He tried to offer him hush money, but once that didn't work out, Thomas got desperate and went to Falcone. This leads to Elliot's accidental death, depending on who you believe, and has set the stage for Hush's arrival. I mean, come on, they literally have the word hush written out in big letters here. You can't get more obvious than that. Traditionally, Edward is Tommy's grandfather, but I think they should just simply make him his father here. It gives him a motive to want Bruce Wayne to pay since he benefited from his father's death, and perhaps he tries to take the identity because Tommy feels he deserved that life, not Bruce. It's another way to continue the themes of that first movie with a villain from the Wayne's family past who's come back to haunt Bruce, and that sounds great, right? But maybe it's too good to be true, because part of me feels like Hush is way too similar to this version of the Riddler. He's another serial killer villain with personal ties to Bruce's ancestry and isn't trying to get revenge on Batman, but Bruce Wayne instead. Even their looks are similar in this universe. Just swap out the mask for some bandages and bam, you've got a good looking Hush design. That's not to say I don't think they should ever do Hush, they absolutely should, but maybe hold out until later for him. For now, let's look at another contestant who'd be a breath of cold, fresh air as the villain. Up next is a character I've seen a lot of fans, myself included, ask for in the sequel. He's one of the coolest villains of all time and would be a nice addition to the universe. It's Victor, Mr. Freeze. Honestly, not a very creative name on his part, but hey, if it works, it works. Well, he's made an infamous appearance in live action before.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Freeze has never been done justice on the silver screen, despite being arguably the most complex of Batman's villains. He's not out to hurt people or cause chaos, he's just desperate to find equipment that will help save his beloved Nora. She's dying of an incurable disease, so he froze her in hopes of finding the cure one day and letting her live out a full life. It's a noble effort on his part and the villain I most sympathize with because at his core, he's a relatively normal guy, even if he is blue and trapped in a suit after an accident left his body with sub-zero temperatures. And no, they shouldn't do the bad modern origin where Nora actually isn't his wife because that rips away all the tragedy and makes him a much less interesting character. That idea is stupid, and whoever came up with that should be ashamed. I just want to see Mr. Freeze as a smart man driven to crime for good reason. Unlike the other two villains mentioned thus far, Mr. Freeze doesn't have any personal grudges with Batman or Bruce Wayne. Batman just happens to be getting in his way, and that's where the conflict arises. That dynamic between the two would immediately set Freeze apart from the Riddler and offer a different way for Batman to handle him. He's not a terrorist trying to blow up the city or end corrupt officials, he's in a race against time to complete an impossible task. It could be really interesting to see Batman try and appeal to Victor's emotions while the city hunts him for the collateral damage he's causing. Sure, he may be stealing Wayne tech, but for a billionaire, that's nothing. Bruce can lose that and the company wouldn't even notice. But I think having him almost relate to Freeze in a way as they connect over their grief could be really touching. Bruce knows what it's like to lose someone. He can sympathize with Victor because he's familiar with all that pain himself as well as holding onto it as long as possible. I bet Bruce would have done the same thing if he could to try and save his parents, but he never had the chance to like Victor has with Nora. Perhaps she could also help Bruce process his grief more too as he goes out of his way to help Freeze. The solution isn't fighting him as Batman, it's helping him as Bruce Wayne. It's another way for Bruce to see the impact he can have as himself. Batman would have just locked Mr. Freeze up to send a message throughout Gotham, but Bruce can make a difference here. He can use his team of scientists to work around the clock to find this cure for Nora, or even go as far as hiring Victor and giving him the resources he needs to do things by the book. Unless he turned the city into popsicles, then that wouldn't really be good luck for him, but the point is that Bruce has the money and technology to make a difference and solve Victor's problems with the right methods. Leaning into that different side of him is really important when the Batman ended with Bruce realizing that only through hope can change be made. This is a much more hopeful solution and could even maybe help Bruce heal from his parents' deaths a little more as he prevents someone else from losing their beloved one and going down a dark, cold path. Mr. Freeze would also be a great villain to help this universe embrace the supernatural more. While his ice gun is unrealistic, it's a much easier sell than something like controlling planes with your mind. It's a step in the right direction towards making this universe more comic booky as each movie gradually increases the amount of sci-fi elements included. His cryogenic abilities can all be tech-based to still fit in with the tone of the universe as it begins to differ more from our own world. I think it'd be really smart to bring Freeze in and help push Reeves' Batman universe forward and add variety to the saga's villains. It also helps that Gotham City flooded last fall and now maybe over the winter it's all turned to ice. It's the perfect atmosphere to bring Freeze into as he's working in his element. It'll only make him a more dangerous threat to Batman, and most importantly, it'll give us some great snowy visuals. Just imagine a Christmas Batman movie in a wintertime setting with a cold-themed villain at the forefront. Wait a second, am I just describing Batman Returns? Okay, don't do that again, but you get my point. I love a good winter Batman story, and Mr. Freeze is the perfect choice for that, along with establishing a new supernatural side of this universe. I think he's a good choice and long overdue for a proper adaptation, but before I make my decision, let's meet our last candidate. In my humble opinion, he's the most underrated villain in Batman's entire rogues gallery, a character who's never had the proper adaptation and is just waiting for his moment to break out of the mud. None other than Bat-chelor, better known as Clayface. While there are a few different origins out there for the character, I think that this movie should focus on his time as an actor caught in a terrible accident that leaves him disfigured. And when you're ugly, Hollywood wants nothing to do with you. This leaves him desperate and using an experimental clean called Renew You. Clever, right? It restores his perfect looks, but only temporarily. It's an incredibly addictive chemical, and the more he uses it, the worse his condition gets when it wasn't being applied. To make a long story short, it ends up with him being covered in that stuff and turning to the shape-shifting monster that is Clayface. Able to become anything or anyone, he's a dangerous threat both mentally and physically, adding paranoia and packing some serious strength. Clayface was made for the movies. I don't understand how we haven't gotten him in live action up to this point. His power set is ideal for both exciting action and thrilling suspense, and would be a real challenge for the world's greatest detective. Picture a murder mystery where the killer could be anyone at any time and there's no way of knowing. That sounds great, right? I'm just gonna assume you agree with me. I can't hear you. Please stop talking to your screen. It would be really exciting watching Batman try and find out who's going around killing people to get more of this mysterious drug when the trail runs dry every time. His detective skills would be really put to the test here, and the best part is that it will all culminate in a big final battle with a giant mud monster at the end. What more could you want in a comic book movie? Let me just get the obvious out of the way. I am very well aware that going from a grounded villain like the Riddler to a living Mudman would be a huge jump, but you've got to make it at some point, right? I'm probably delusional for even pitching him, but you don't understand how bad I want to see this. Clayface is such a cool character and is long overdue for his time to shine. I know there's a version where he's just a guy who can change his appearance and isn't made of clay, but L plus ratio plus the Mudman is better. I do think he should start out as that version at the beginning of the movie though. Then at a certain point he applies too much of the Renew You and becomes a mud monster going into the third act. That way you get the best of both worlds, where it's still a grounded killer, changing his appearance and making it difficult for Batman, but then at the end of the movie you get this exciting action sequence as Batman is outmatched by a giant mud monster, and that's just the coolest thing ever to me. It may be too early to bring someone like him into this universe, but you can't get a much fresher villain than someone who hasn't even been in live action before. He would offer something that hasn't been seen in a Batman movie and could make for some really tense and horrific scenes if handled correctly. Plus, I think there are some really interesting angles you could approach him with from a thematic standpoint. There's a really interesting and tragic story to be told about addiction as Basil struggles with his new life and accepting his appearance. He's not only addicted to the drug cream, but to the fame and spotlight that comes with being a famous actor. No matter how hard Batman tries to save him from himself, the illness that is addiction is too strong and pulls him towards doing some truly heinous things to sustain it. If you really want to go crazy with the addiction angle, have Bruce's arc be about his addiction to crime fighting. How he's become too obsessed with his work as Batman to the point where he doesn't even have a healthy life balance. He's going too hard with it and is bound to get himself killed if he doesn't take it easy, but in his mind he can't stop because every second he isn't protecting Gotham, more innocent people are getting hurt. Then by the end of the movie, after seeing Clayface's addiction destroy him, Bruce can take a step back and try and deal with his own issues as he looks to establish a healthier balance between Batman and Bruce Wayne. There's so much untapped potential in a villain like Clayface that it warrants the supernatural jump for the unique storytelling and action he brings with him. Now that we've ran through all of our candidates, that brings me to my final decision for who I think should be the villain in The Batman. We're doing another Batman. It's genuinely a really hard choice. I've struggled a lot with trying to pick just one character, because I think all four of these villains have something to offer and would give you a great original Batman story. On one hand, Hush makes the most sense thematically as he continues telling the story of the first movie setup and will give us more Bruce Wayne development, but then again, there's so much you can do with a character like Clayface that we haven't seen in live action that I really think they should jump on here. And for that alone, I think I'm officially going to crown Clayface as the Bat-chelor. Congratulations to my muddy buddy, now go ruin that mentally ill billionaire's life. Also, I think it'd be really cool to have Victor Freeze as a Wayne Tech scientist in this movie, and Bruce goes to him to get cryotechnology to freeze Clayface, and that's how Batman defeats him. Then, in a post-credit scene, set up Mr. Freeze as the villain for the next movie. Bam! It's the best of both worlds. I get all the villains I want in this universe. I never lose. And you can't stop me. You're already at the end of the video. What are you gonna do? Click off? I already got your attention. The sunk cost fallacy says you're gonna see it through to the end. Why not just have Hush be the villain for the first movie, then the second movie is Clayface, and then the third is Mr. Freeze? I get it all. I figured it out. Who needs one Bachelor when you could have three? Okay, but for real, you've all heard the reasoning, so hope you can understand my choice for Clayface. There are so many good Batman villains that this was impossible to narrow brought down. I didn't even get to mention a character like Two-Face who is perfect for this universe, but I think he should be saved for later. They should build him up as the district attorney in a few appearances before he goes full sadistic murderer. It'll make that turn hit even harder when the audience has gotten to know him and love him as a character. Honestly, you really can't go wrong with any Batman villain, as long as it isn't the Joker. Please, Matt Reeves, stay true to your word. He's a great villain, but I'm so desperate to see other characters get to be in these movies. My only hope is it'll be a fresh, new character. I just gave him like 4 ideas right there. Alright, they can have those for free, but I will charge for the next ones. There are hardly any misses in Batman's rogues gallery, so whoever they do end up choosing, I have no doubt will go down as another all-time villain. Thank you all for watching. Let me know down below who you want to see as the villain in the Batman More Batman. If it's someone that wasn't mentioned in the video, please do let me know. I'd love to see what everyone else is thinking. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can click right here. And make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss another one. If you don't do it, we're just going to be stuck with Joker forever, so please, for the love of God, go subscribe and save us from that clown.